This year's Vuelta a España has simultaneously managed to be the worst and the best Grand Tour. This started off with a pretty atrocious first week, whereby the organisers seemed to have a vendetta against every single rider in the peloton. Firstly, we started off with potentially the sketchiest team time trial there has ever been in the history of cycling. Not only was it raining, but then, as the day went on, it soon became apparent that the final riders were going to be coming across in darkness, which wasn't the best news for a lot of the big GC hitters, including Remco Evenepoel, who made his opinions very clear at the end of the stage, saying that something along the lines of that the organisers were stupid and were trying to kill them because there were no lights. In fact, the only thing that could have made this worse was if Batman decided to pull out and decided to play a bit of ping pong with the riders on his Batmobile. But that's about it. It was a pretty bad TTT, but we moved on to stage 2, where unfortunately it was still raining.
As I thought, plenty of time before it rains.
And therefore we had a neutralised finish towards the stage. But because of this, the final times for GC were taken before the final climb, but there were still bonus seconds on offer on this climb. However, because the organisers are a professional body, they didn't know who took the bonus seconds on the final climb, so they had to crowdsource this information from the public who were filming at the side of the road, which, again, professional body and a professional race. It's not a particularly good look when you don't know who's got the bonus seconds. Before all this even happened, Jumbo tried to control the peloton because Primož Roglic was behind the peloton because he crashed, as Primož Roglic always does, because him and Geraint Thomas seem to ride around like Bambi on ice. However, when Jonas tried to go and tell big rouleurs on the front of the peloton to try and slow down, he was pretty swiftly told to fuck off.
I am a cop, and you will respect my authority!
Which is pretty correct, considering that none of those guys seem to respect Jonas because he is literally brought on a soft pillow to the base of every climb, where he does watts per kilo better than everybody else and then wins the stage on top of mountaintop finishes. They don't really respect him when he tells them what to do as a rouleur and a domestique. So, quite rightfully, the peloton didn't really slow up that much. Then, after this, there was a series of sketchy sprints, which was won by Caden Groves, who proved to be the best at being able to navigate 10 roundabouts in the space of 5 kilometres in a sprint finish, plus avoiding Marlene van den Berg going too hot into the final corner of a sprint, and also getting around Juan Sebastian Milano. Then, flights were cancelled, which meant that riders got into their hotels at 3 AM in the morning. Then, Remco crashed into a soigneur because the organisers decided that 100 metres was sufficient space after the finish line for the riders to slow down so that they didn't crash into all the soigneurs at the end. And Remco took this as a challenge because he came across the line pulling a face which made it look like he'd smelt blue cheese for the first time. And then he didn't have his hands on the bars to brake, so he decided to use the soigneurs as a brake pad and therefore smacked into one, cut his head open, which then did also lead to Remco not being the happiest person in the peloton, especially after the TTT, which pretty much almost killed him.
It's already the third day in a row, it's a bit breaking my balls now.
So, it wasn't the best week, including the fact that there was also an oil protest. Hundreds of gallons of oil was going to get poured onto the peloton, which at first hand seemed like a waste of oil, because people believed it was olive oil, but it wasn't. It was just standard crude oil, so for some reason that ended up being a bit better. But it was stopped because the Spanish police were on that, so fair play to them, they actually stopped that one. Then, also in the first week, Jumbo Visma took a massive turd on the whole peloton. A turd big enough that it could probably stop the flow of the Ganges River. It was absolutely massive. Stage 6, Sepp Kuss won easily from a breakaway up the... I'm just going to check the name of the climb because I want this to be proper, you know. He won up the Observatorio Astrofisio de Alhambra. He won up a pretty steep climb, basically. And it wasn't even really close. Sepp just pissed off away from everybody, which, considering that this man is on the 3rd Grand Tour of the season, that he is finished as well, this performance is, in every sense of the word, unbelievable. And you can make of that what you will. So whilst Kuss was busy shitting on the stage of the breakaway and all the people up the road, Primož Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard decided to take a shit on the whole peloton as well at the same time, so that everybody could smell the stench of Jumbo Visma. But the organisers, being the fantastic organisers that they are, didn't actually catch Roglic's attack, and they didn't catch Jonas bridging across to him. But they did manage to catch them riding off into the distance and putting 15 seconds into their closest rivals, and therefore, on stage 6 of the Vuelta a España, the race seemed pretty much over, and everyone was already depressed by the Jumbo Visma dominance.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out.
The only good thing that came out of this was that Lenny Martinez, the new hope of French cycling, spanked the previous hope of French cycling, Romain Bardet, which meant that Lenny Martinez moved into the red jersey in the first week of racing, which did lead to an incredible uproar of support on cycling Twitter, who are known to have nervous breakdowns from time to time. So after Lenny was in red, the race was not over. It was very much alive. After this, a tin of Heinz soup won a sprint accidentally, and it looked like this race was fully alive again. The Ciclismo was here. Jumbo Visma were not going to make us any more depressed than we were at that point in time.
One day later,
Jumbo Visma take the stage. Roglic gets one ahead of Evenepoel.
But then Roglic won a stage again because Remco thought that there was somebody up the road and therefore he didn't really bother sprinting to the line.
I just didn't know it was going to be today.
Which seems like a pretty lame excuse, to be honest with you. Like, how do you not know that there isn't somebody up the road? Like, come on. Surely the team car's on that. Surely you should be keeping an eye on that. Although, to be fair, he was very much busy getting ganged up on by UAE Team Emirates and Jumbo Visma. So maybe he was a bit busy with that and also trying not to die down the very steep and dangerous descent. And then really what rounded off the first week was that Leonard Kemner finally won the trifecta. He got his Vuelta a España stage win, which means that he got a stage win in every single Grand Tour. Great news. However, because of a landslip or some kind of mud, sand in the final 300 metres of racing, the race was neutralised at 2 kilometres to go. Which doesn't really make sense, because if the problem is only in the final 300 metres, why are we taking the GC times at 2 kilometres to go? It doesn't really make that much sense. Plus, have you seen what the peloton has had to ride over in lots of years gone by? We have cyclocross, for goodness sake, where people ride through snow and sand and mud, and then we make them ride across gravel on lots of occasions, and then we also make them ride up cobblestones. But for some reason we draw the line at sand. It's like the race organisers are literally run by Anakin Skywalker.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating. And it gets everywhere.
Again and again.
Hey, you shut your face!
So, Kemner wins the stage, the GC times are taken at 2 kilometres to go, and then every GC rider then rides at 100 watts to the top of the climb in the most weird and unprecedented finish to a stage that I've ever seen in my decade of watching professional cycling. After the rest day, Ganna wins the TT, pretty convincingly. Remco didn't really get that close, but he was the fastest of the GC contenders. Jonas Vingegaard lost time. He was over a minute down on Ganna. He was over 40 seconds down on some of the major GC players, including his teammate Primož Roglic, and therefore Jonas was out of the Vuelta. He was done. His legs had packed in. He'd cracked mentally and physically. This was it. Jonas Vingegaard was not going to dominate this Vuelta a España.
Jonas Vingegaard, a tsunami of power. What about that?
God fucking damn them to hell!
you seem upset.
I'm freaking pissed, man!
But then he won at the Tourmalet a few days later. But before that happened, before we get depressed again, Jesus Herrada won a stage after Ineos Grenadiers paced all day, and then Geraint Thomas was spanked by a load of puncheurs. Jesus Herrada's Soigneur was pretty much murdered by the Spanish police, and then Alpecin got fully blatted in. UAE did a fantastic job and stopped Alpecin de Koenig from winning every single sprint stage in this race, which looked like a pretty inevitable thing that was going to be happening. Then what happened is then we went to the Tourmalet, and Jumbo Visma pretty much killed off the entire race. Not before Remco Evenepoel killed off his own race though, because Evenepoel was dropped with over 8 kilometres to go and his GC was done with. He finished about 30 minutes behind the main contenders. But Jumbo Visma decided to deploy the most dominant mountain performance shown by any team in the modern era. Because Jonas attacked with over 5 kilometres to go. Then, in the final few kilometres, Sepp Kuss attacked, was blatted in, and then attacked again, and then Primož Roglic followed behind him, which meant that Jumbo Visma came first, second and third up one of the toughest climbs in the whole of cycling. To which point everyone let out a sigh of sadness, because the race seemed pretty much over at this point. The one advantage that came out of this was that because Remco dropped out of GC, he was now going to dominate the breakaways. He was going to go and take a massive shit on every breakaway climber going, and at least try and animate the breakaways in that sense. Unless, of course, he is scrolling Tinder on his Garmin in the final sprint, where Wout Poels is also there. But we'll get onto that in a couple of minutes. So then people were questioning at this point, with the Tourmalet out of the way, Jonas had attacked. Should he have attacked Sepp Kuss? Was he undermining the leadership in Jumbo Visma? I think at this point it was okay, because he was in third and he was a little bit down on GC, so therefore it wasn't too bad. He was securing his position from Juan Ayuso, who was still relatively close on GC. Not a bad move. But surely Jonas wasn't going to do anything more. He was just going to sit behind and work for Kuss from this point onwards. That is surely what was going to happen, right?
Vinegar has gone. This is not a man sitting up thinking, oh, I'll just let my teammate keep hold of the jersey. This is a proper bid for it.
So that didn't work out, because Jonas put 1 minute and 5 seconds into Sepp Kuss and Primož Roglic on that finish. And that put him into second place in GC, only 29 seconds behind Sepp Kuss. And this did cause a bit of a stir on cycling Twitter, because people were not particularly happy about Sepp Kuss's leadership being under threat.
I will massacre you! I will fuck you up!
And people started to not like Jumbo Visma, which it's about time. What's taken you all so long to join this resistance against Jumbo Visma? But at least you're here now, alright? We need to stand up to the power. Where was I? Finn Fisher-Black attacked on this stage as well and finished in second place, to which some entitled people on Twitter who buy themselves Twitter Blue and then ask provocative questions in order to gain money from Twitter Blue and then post that said revenue on Twitter to boast to people who also give advice to Jumbo Visma, but they don't want to brag about it, but they still do. These people weren't happy about this and said that Finn Fisher-Black should have sat on the front of the peloton to bring Juan Ayuso closer to Jonas Vingegaard, who was attacking up the road, which does kind of make sense. But at the same time, Juan Ayuso was getting fully spat out the back by Jonas Vingegaard, and therefore Finn Fisher-Black sitting on the peloton was going to do jack shit in the grand scheme of things. So I think Finn Fisher-Black attacking was good. So there you have it. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Once Jonas had put time into Sepp Kuss, we then moved on to the Angliru, which is pretty much the toughest climb in professional cycling. There is also some other ones, but the Angliru is very much considered to be one of the toughest. And just when you thought the race couldn't get any spicier, it absolutely did. Because what happened on this stage was just mind-blowing. Firstly, the first mind-blowing thing was that Bahrain Victorious set pace. Firstly, with the Italian sniper who decided to put down his ranks for the day to try and help his teammate Mikel Landa, who was on flying form, and Landa, being Landa, didn't really attack once the group had whittled down, but he was moving up on GC. What did happen is that Primož Roglic moved to the front, set a pace that was quite hard, that dropped Landa, but it dragged Jonas Vingegaard and Sepp Kuss away with him, which meant that Jumbo Visma were once again going to finish first, second and third on a mighty climb in a Grand Tour, and we were once again going to enter into a state of depression. But then Sepp Kuss dropped from this group, from this pace, which was once again causing a nervous breakdown on cycling Twitter, because people were asking, why is Primoz dropping Sepp Kuss? Why is this happening? Why isn't he working for him? All very good questions, and the answer to that is, we don't know. There isn't a good answer for it. So what happens is that Primoz takes 10 bonus seconds, Jonas takes 6, and Sepp Kuss has to roll Mikel Landa for third place to get bonus seconds to limit the loss, so that he is just 8 seconds ahead of his teammate Jonas Vingegaard at the end of the Angliru. What is going on? Jumbo Visma decided to really try and test the patience of every single cycling fan in the universe at this point by putting Sepp Kuss's leadership under threat by his 2 teammates who have already won a Grand Tour this season. Why not let the Domestique win is what everybody was asking. And to be honest with you, everybody seemed to agree with that. And once again, people were not very happy with Jumbo Visma. And to be honest with you, this is not the first time they've done something annoying. Do you remember when Pogacar attacked on the Champs-Élysées and they sent a rider across to go and sit on his wheel, despite the fact that Pogacar was 8 minutes down on GC or something like that? Because Jumbo Visma just hate anything that's good about cycling. And they did the same thing in the Tour of Britain, except it was a St. Piran rider. This is not the first time that Jumbo Visma have done stupid things. We move on, because then, where's the page? Then we move on to stage 18, where Jumbo Visma certainly cracked the whip. Something that in Richard Pluger, or whatever his stupid name is, he said, no beer tonight, lads. Listen, here's what we're going to do. You are actually going to ride for Sepp now, and you're going to stop fucking around and trying to take the lead away from him, because we are all on the same team, in case you haven't realised.
Oh, you blithering idiots.
So Roglic and Jonas do ride for him, and Remco won the stage, and nothing really happened, apart from there was a Spanish civil war where Juan Ayuso, Mikel Landa and Enric Mas all tried to be the best Spaniard to try and win the ultimate prize of a lifetime supply of paella. And out of that, Mikel Landa was the most successful. Then we had a sprint which was won by Dainese, because Alpecin-Deceuninck wiped out their whole train. Then, Wout Poels won a sprint against Remco Evenepoel, because Remco Evenepoel was too busy scrolling on his Garmin. Then we had the final stage around Madrid, where Jumbo Visma were parading around in their new stupid one-off kit, which had a yellow band, a pink band, and also a red band, because it represented all the Grand Tours which they'd won this season.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Which is, in my opinion, presumptuous, big-headed, and should just simply not be allowed. I hate one-off kits on the final day of a race. I think they should be banned, and anyone who wears one should be banned. And also, did you notice on that final stage, there was that team time trial off the front, which contained Remco and Ganna and some other guys? That was possibly the most ciclismo, glinter and panache-filled move in the whole of the race. It was pure cycling joy. And do you want to know who was not involved at all in any of this? Jumbo Visma. Because Jumbo Visma are the antichrist of cycling. They hate anything that is pure and fun and exciting about cycling. They are robotic, annoying and predictable. And they need to be stopped. But anyway, Sepp Kuss wins the Vuelta a España ahead of Jonas Vingegaard and Primoz Roglic, which means that 8 of the 9 spots of the Grand Tour podiums this year have been taken by either a UAE or a Jumbo Visma rider. Well, some other things have been taken out of this race. Firstly, La Vuelta a España wanted to try and kill the peloton, but was not successful in killing everyone. Jumbo Visma are ruining cycling, and they need to be stopped at all costs. Geraint Thomas and Primoz Roglic still can't stay on their bikes because they are Bambi on ice. Caden Groves is the best sprinter of the shit sprinters in this race, and the hopes of cycling and all things good about the sport simply rest in the hands of Tadej Pogacar. Lord bless our souls.
Help me.
Tadej Pogacar.
You're my only hope.